Hey there, friends. Dave Paulides, Canada Missing Project. That's executive producer Huck. And she may be looking mighty white right now because we went out and took a long hike, and then she was huffing and puffing, and it had been a while since she got a good bath, so I said, we're going to do a little bath out in the side yard and get you a little white, and cooled her off. And she's one of these weird dogs that really likes getting all soaked up and wet, and you're a good girl when you take baths. Yes, you're a good girl. Yeah, you're a good girl. And then on the hike, we saw a bunch of deer, a bunch of birds. Oh, yeah, you're a good girl. Yeah, you're a good girl. She's a good girl. Yeah, she's a good pup. Well, she's going to be hanging out with us, making sure Dad does a good job for her. And of course, this is Huck TV. It's her channel. Very demanding gal. And let's get right into it, folks. We're going to talk about some cases, again, out of Dinkey Creek. I had a bunch of emails when before I started this, when I used to talk about Dinkey Creek. They say, oh, Dave, come on. Stop exaggerating. There aren't that many cases out there. Oh, tell me now. For an area that's not a national park, it has a lot of cases for a 40-mile radius. And I haven't found another area in the Sierras that's like it. Area just south of Yosemite, just west of Sequoia and Kings Canyon National Park. And now, if you've been staying with me and you've been watching the series on Dinkey Creek, you may be wondering, how did Dinkey Creek get its name? Well, that's a good question, Ollie. And because I know there's a lot of animal lovers there, hold your taters and listen to this story. Fresno Bee, February 18th, 1951. High in the Sierra, above the San Joaquin Valley, is the cascading, turbulent stream with the intriguing name of Dinkey Creek. Only in the late summer and fall is the name appropriate. Then the flow is down to a bare trickle when the snow at the source is gone and no rain has fallen for months. But in the spring, Dinkey Creek would be called a river in some localities. I've said that. Too big for a creek. It pounds in rushing torrents down the canyon, roaring, swirling in a precipitous drop to its mating with the Kings River. The story back of Dinkey's naming is a sentimental one. Little known tale which helps to make the tempestuous character of the fabulous Frank Ducey better understood. Ironically, the name with Dinkey Creek often is associated with Camp Ducey, similar in sound but different in spelling, which has no connection with Frank Ducey. Ducey was a remarkable man, able to meet adversity with some cheerfulness which attended success. He was a man of vision, a dreamer with a practical side. He was a miner, an oil man, an explorer, a photographer of note, a rancher, cattleman, sheepman, merchant, cobbler, quarry owner, promoter, and above all, a man of deep conviction and a firm believer in his own destiny and that of the San Joaquin Valley. The Sierras go up the east side of California. Right next to the Sierras is the San Joaquin Valley, better known as a producer of much of the nation's produce and vegetables. Ducey was born in Canada, French extraction. Orphaned at the age of 8, he made his way on foot to Connecticut, where he became apprenticed to a cobbler and learned the trade. The gold and excitement of California beckoned while he still was in his teens, and he came west. He panned for the precious yellow flakes in the mother lode country with indifferent success. He became a storekeeper and a freighter. He found oil near what is now Coalinga and formed a company to exploit it. Ducey was an inquisitive type, always looking into something new or different, always exploring what the fellow had passed up or never reached. When the infant science of photography made its appearance in the West, Ducey was one of his first to embrace it. Rare pictures survive him. Some of the rarest of the early days are those taken by him. He tramped from one end of the valley to the other, recording photographic wonders and evolving a portable developing room. He loaded his cumbersome camera equipment on mules and took priceless pictures of the little-known Sierra at the time. Ducey loved the mountains almost as much as he did the valley, and he spent weeks at a time seeking out their mysteries. It was Ducey who discovered the majestically beautiful Teapite Valley, which back in 1869, he had followed a bear he had wounded, followed the animal through dense foliage, up and over rocky barriers and massive fallen trees, until suddenly, bursting before him in grandeur, almost unmatchable anywhere in the world, he caught the white man's first glimpse of Teapite. He was returning from Teapite when, on the bank of a rocky stream, he met another bear. This one was big, old, and mean. Ducey fired quickly, too quickly for good aim. The slug tore through the animal's side, but it didn't kill him. Snarling, the huge bear charged. Ducey slipped on grassy slope. The bear plunged over him, missing him only by inches. He had dropped his rifle, and now he groped frantically for it, wondering whether his luck had played out, wondering whether death and the ferocious wounded bear were synonymous. The maddened animal reversed himself and came back, but before he could reach the victim, Ducey's little white and black mongrel dog went into action. He sank his sharp teeth into the bear's tender nose and hung on. The interruption saved Ducey's life. It gave him time to locate his rifle, reload, and fire again. This time his aim was true, and the bear toppled over, dead. But in those frightening seconds, the bear's big paw had brushed the dog from him as a man would flip a fly from his nose. The sharp claws caught the brave little pooch on his side, tearing him wide open. Whimpering with pain, the dog crawled to his master. They say Frank Ducey wept, as only a strong man can weep, while he held the mangled form on his faithful dog in his arms and watched him die. And then, with his hunting knife in bare hands, he scooped out a grave beside the creek and buried his loyal canine friend. And from this day, that stream has been known as Dinkey Creek, named after Frank Ducey for his little white and black mongrel dog, Dinkey. This is the drawing that came with the article in the paper. This is Ducey, Dinkey Creek. What I found interesting about the article was, first of all, I didn't even know how Dinkey Creek was named. But back in those days, California and the Sierras was a different mountain range. Back in those days, California had grizzly bears. And the bear on the flag of the state of California is a grizzly bear, even though there are no grizzly bears there today. So that's your story on Frank Ducey and Dinkey Creek. The things dogs will do for us. I've heard it a 1,000 times. And I've seen it. I've probably seen it 50 times, where I was part of a SWAT team and we would send in dogs after armed people. And there was no hesitation by the dog. And thank goodness we never lost a dog. to injury by a suspect. Dogs are amazing. I'm grateful I have Huck. So, the first story, Dinkey Creek again. And this has I'm going to warn you ahead of time. It's about a little boy, but it has a happy ending. A strange ending, but a happy ending. So, just because it's about a little boy, don't shut it down. Give it time. Randy Scott Libby was 3 years old, missing June 26, 1957 at 6 p.m. at Dinkey Creek. I want to show you this. This is part of a U.S. Forest Service and U.S. Geological Survey map. And it shows Dinkey Mountain right here at 6,673 feet. 6673. Campsite is even lower than that. It's about 6,000 feet. But I wanted to show you on a map kind of where it was at. So Randy was the son of a Fresno firefighter. I told you before, Fresno is just west of Dinkey Creek, down in the mountains in the San Joaquin Valley. Well, the Fresno firefighter was Harold Libby, and he was married, and he and his wife took their son vacationing with friends, Mr. and Mrs. William Patterson. And in 1957, they were vacationing and staying at cabins in Dinkey Creek. You could rent a cabin for a weekend, a week, whatever. So Randy was playing with the Pattersons' older kids. They weren't near the creek. They were just playing around the cabins. Adults were outside near one of the cabins. They could hear the kids. Well, at about 6 o'clock, they were getting ready to have dinner. And one of the Pattersons went over to the kids and said, "Hey, come on, we're going to have dinner now, let's go." And all of them came running like they should, except one. Randy wasn't there. So the Pattersons and the Libbys asked the kids, "Where's Randy?" And they said, "Well, we were playing and he was here 1 second and then he was gone." Nobody knew where he went. Both groups of parents decided that they'd start searching the area, asking other vacationers at other cabins if they'd seen the little boy. Nobody saw him, nobody heard him, nothing. What they decided to do then was contact the regional rangers that had an office at Dinkey Creek. And the regional ranger in charge was a man named Harold Mitchell. He took the report and then immediately called for other rangers, some off duty at the time, to come to their area and start looking. And it wasn't long before he called for the Fresno County Sheriff's Office, which had the primary jurisdiction in that U.S. forest to look for missing people. Well, they kept searching. They're not finding anything. And the ranger, Harold Mitchell, was primarily concerned that Randy, even though not playing near the water, would go near the water. A reasonable concern. After a couple more hours, the Fresno County deputies started arriving. And one of the first deputies got an update from the ranger. They had nothing. They'd been searching for hours. They weren't getting anything. So the deputy calls for a supervisor. And usually that'd be a sergeant, but a lieutenant named Don Christopher arrived, started speaking to the regional ranger, and determined that there were no tracks, there were no witnesses, they had nothing, which is a really bad sign. So Christopher, being a senior supervisor, asked one of the rangers if he could borrow their phone. And there were phones in Dinkey Creek there at the time. He said, "Sure." So he gets on the phone to their search and rescue people, explains what's going on, and says, yeah, we're going to need some dogs up here in the morning. And we're going to need a lot of search and rescue people. Because if he's not found tonight, we're going to have to find him tomorrow. And they discussed it on the phone, and they said, yeah, we should call Russ Cohn, a very well-known trainer of bloodhounds from Los Gatos, California. I used to live in Los Gatos. It's just outside of San Jose, in the San Francisco Bay Area. They wanted to call him, see if he was available. Search and rescue tracked him down. And they said that they'd fly one of their planes up to San Jose, put he and his dogs on the plane and fly him back to Fresno and get him up in the mountains as early as they could the next day. That was kind of the plan. And in the meantime, deputies and rangers were searching that Dinkey Creek area for any sign of Randy, calling his name, yelling for him. And the surprising thing is that he got away from the population so quick, he never responded to anybody calling his name, which nobody could quite understand. So the next day, June 27th, Ranger Mitchell met with the dogs, met with the handlers, met with the search and rescue team that had arrived. And he said that his entire team walked Dinkey Creek yesterday, and he was 100% convinced that Randy was not in the river or in the creek. Everybody breathed a sigh of relief. But like with everything else, knowing what I know now, I'm not sure I'd be at 100% for anything, but they went with it. So the Fresno County deputies and the U.S. Forest Service Rangers started super early that morning, even before the dogs arrived. And just before noon, Fresno County Deputy Bill Locke and Hubert Nevins, they'd been searching all morning on their horses. And they decided that it might be best to get on the ground and start looking for tracks, which small little feet of a 3-year-old might not see them from a horse. So they put their horses in the stables and they started hiking. This turned out to be a brilliant maneuver. Just outside of Dinkey Creek, they're walking across an old logging road. They described it as a dusty old logging road. And they found one small child's footprint. Just one. How weird is that? I'm sorry, that's odd. I would think it was odd. Well, they searched for a half mile in each direction. They still weren't coming up with anything more. And they couldn't understand it. Well, just after noon, 2 bloodhounds arrived from the Bay Area. Ray Cohn's dogs. And the sheriff's office had Randy's socks and shoes that he had already worn the day before. So the dogs got the scent off of that. Dogs were taken to the area where the deputies lost the track, or saw the track but lost the anymore, and they were set off on that. Deputies said that they ran down the dirt road a bit, and then they came across Eshiker Creek. Not a huge creek, smaller than Dinkey Creek. And the deputy said that the dogs did odd things. They almost went like a zigzag pattern in the creek, back and forth. So they follow the scent trail right to the creek, and then they're gone. They don't know what happened to it. They went to the other side, sniffed around, they went back to the other side, boom, boom, boom. They did that 4 or 5 times, they said. Till eventually, the dogs are further upstream on the opposite side of the creek. What does that mean? It means Randy crossed that creek. And the dogs start tracking up to the top of a ridge, uphill from the creek, and they get to a top of a point called Marble Point. And there, at the top of Marble Point, sat Randy. Marble Point has an elevation of 8,868 feet, or approximately 2,200 feet higher than the campground at Dinkey Creek. "6 p.m. is when he was found. This is essentially all granite out there. He was still wearing his orange and black bathing suit, and one of the first things he said to the deputies and rangers were, "The thistles hurt my feet." So the Dinkey Creek Ranger Station is right here. Marble Point's over here. You would travel to it by going just to the west of Bear Mountain. Now you got a lot of bear, a lot of mountain lion, and you got a little 3-year-old boy. They followed the ridge, 8,868 feet. They specifically said he was at the top of Marble Point. Unbelievable. Rangers asked Randy a few questions like, "Where were you last night?" And brilliantly, he said, "I slept in a log." Smart. Rangers said to the press that Randy had hiked 8 miles in bare feet and had walked upwards in elevation 2,200 feet and had been missing 24 hours. I've talked to you a lot about small children, distances traveled. How are they able to do it? And elevation gained. Search and rescue protocol says that a 3-year-old will be found 95% of the time in a mountain area 2.8 miles or less from the point last seen. Randy was far outside that. The manual also says that a 3-year-old will be found after climbing an elevation 1,303 feet above where they were last seen 95% of the time or less. Obviously, Randy blew that out of the water. Randy had to have crossed Eshker Creek. Had to have. He got to a point on Marble Point. It's essentially all granite everywhere. He was far outside search and rescue protocol for a boy his age, and he was far outside the elevation gain for the protocol for a boy his age. I get a lot of search and rescue people watching me, and I get very few comments about these. And do you know why? Because it makes them feel uncomfortable. 99.9% of all the search and rescue managers stick right to this protocol. They will not go outside of it, ever. Even though I probably have 50 cases where kids were found outside, far outside, search and rescue protocols for distance traveled and for height achieved. Now this is a picture of Randy and his dad, Harold. So there were 50, his dad was a Fresno firefighter, and they had 50 firefighters drive up overnight and help them search. And they had another 150 searchers that day none of the searchers found Randy. This was all in the hands of bloodhounds who found him. Now, this is contrary to 99% of the cases I talked about, and I've talked to you about. Missing 411 cases, dogs do not find victims. Well, Dave, what happened here? That's what I'd like to know. First of all, I know that the canines that they were using on this case were some of the best in the world. These dogs were super well trained, and I have read many times where these dogs had found people in cities and outside cities before. So a lot of it has to do with the training and how serious the handler wants to get about the training on these dogs. I think that's part of it. But something else is at play. First of all, kids don't normally cross creeks. That was odd. And when the dogs went in a zigzag pattern at that creek, shows you how smart that dog was. I think in the dog's mind, they knew it had come up to that creek and the scent stopped. But they were trying to figure out if the boy walked up the creek further while in the creek, or did it cross a parallel path and just go straight across and come out the other side? When the dog realized it didn't go straight across, but it probably walked upstream, which seems odd, it picked up the scent again. So the other part about this that I want you to understand is that dogs are super effective. And I doubt Randy would have been found if it wasn't for these bloodhounds. Thank goodness that boy was found, and his parents were ecstatic, needless to say. Okay, the next case involves a man and a veteran named Ron Sallee. This is Ron, 41 years old, went missing September 2nd, 1989 at about 7 p.m. He was from Oakhurst, California, and he had a daughter named Megan. So this was on Labor Day weekend in 89. And he and some buddies had made plans this was going on for a long time, to hike over Labor Day weekend. And they planned to spend a majority of their time in the Sierra National Forest and travel to the Ansel Adams Wilderness and take the Cassidy Trail to the San Joaquin River to fish. Now here's the Dinkey Creek Ranger Station. This is where they were in the Ansel Adams Wilderness, outside of Yosemite. The area of this cluster goes from this at the far northern point, down here to Balch Camp, over and up. Balch Camp, we've talked about cases there. Right now they have a garnet fire going on. But this area, something very odd about it, folks. Something very odd. So he's with his friends. They plan this trip. They take some maps. And then I looked it up, what it said about the Ansel Adams Wilderness and the Cassidy Trail. And on the site called All Trails, this is what it said. It said, this is a challenging and gorgeous loop through the Ansel Adams Wilderness. It starts from the Minarets Road and leads east on Miller's Creek Trail until it begins a steep descent down numbered switchbacks on the Cassidy Trail. At the San Joaquin River, the trail begins a climb back up on switchbacks to the incredibly scenic Rattlesnake Lake in Cassidy Meadows, which heads north on the Cassidy Meadows Trail, crossing the river again before completing the loop on the Miles Crossing Trail. Ansel Adams. Hopefully you guys know who he is. He's taking some of the most epic photos of Yosemite you can imagine. When I was younger, I had a couple of his photos, not the real ones, prints, up in my office, because they were black and white, but they were beautiful. Look up Ansel Adams prints and you'll see what I mean. He had an ability to capture nature at its most prestigious and beautiful form. So they're hiking, and friends said that during the hike, Ron slipped and fell and possibly hit his head. And the friends stated that after the fall, he started to act strangely. Now, they never described what strangely meant. Heck, some people just act strangely all the time. But at that time, the group was within a mile of their campsite adjacent to the San Joaquin River. And they noticed that Ron wasn't at the back of the pack like he normally was. Remember, don't be last in line. So once the group arrived at their campsite, they dropped their gear, started to search for Ron. They called his name, they shot rounds into the air, identifying their position, which is smart and which you should do. He was last seen wearing a bright red and white tank top, cut-off blue jeans, white hiking boots, a straw cowboy hat, a blue backpack with a blue sleeping bag. He was reported missing the following day when the group hiked out to report him missing, and the search and rescue started that day on September 3rd. I'm going to tell you, that's a lot of hiking, and I'm sure that those people hadn't planned on it. But God bless them that they hiked out and reported him right away. I have no doubt that they were looking for him through the whole night and wondering where their buddy was. Search and rescue lasted 3 days. They saw and they found nothing. It was terminated on September 7th. Now, what I'd like everyone to remember, it's been 36 years. Where could the backpack go? So, back in '89, backpacks were not as advanced as they are today. Most of them were aluminum framed. Those frames are going to last forever. A lot of the backpacks were actually made of canvas. A lot of those things on that backpack should be around, including his belt, his white boots. White boots, I read that. I'm not sure I've seen white hiking boots. There wasn't much said about his military service, but a 3-day effort to find Ron had a lot to do with the location of this so far in the middle of everywhere. The sheriff's office put up a plane, which was smart, which could get over the site quickly and look, and that plane flew for 2 days. And then they put up posters at the trailhead asking if anyone had seen him. Nobody had seen him. The normal kind of things people did. They also put some experienced ground pounders in. I hate to say this, folks, but when you have limited time and limited resources, those ground pounders aren't going to spend a lot of time going off trail. They're just going to search the known trails and hopefully run into them because they don't have the time. And this goes back to what I've talked about a lot. If you're way off in the middle of nowhere, and something happens, chances of survival are slim, because the chances of you getting competent and a high number of ground pounders and search and rescue people looking for you is slim. The closer you are to a population base, the better chance you have of surviving. Information on Ron's case was slim to begin with. There weren't a lot of details, and usually on an 89 case, I would find a lot. Now they're saying that point of separation with Ron happened at 7 o'clock at night. I wish I knew what happened to him. And did it have something with him slipping and maybe hitting his head? That seems like a long shot to me. But if he did hurt his head and he hurt himself and he was acting abnormally, I think that's incumbent upon the people that you're with to help you, support you, and get you home safely. That's what being a partner in the middle of nowhere is all about. So I appreciate you being here very much. Huck is just whipped. After that hike today, then getting a nice cold bath, she's whipped. You can do me a great big favor by putting these videos on your social media site. Sometimes people can just analyze and say, oh, you know what, people disappear. But one of the reasons I did all of these cases around Dinkey Creek is to show you that there are some unusual places outside of national parks. A lot of people say, well, you know, people disappear at national parks because a lot of people visit national parks. Well, this isn't a national park. It isn't even a national monument. It's just a plain old U.S. forest. Yet there's a lot of people missing, folks. And even though I try my best to be a great researcher, I'm gonna say I probably miss people. And I miss them because the articles are so slim. Some sheriff's offices back 20, 30 years ago just didn't report them like they do today. I don't know. Kindness. Be kind to your neighbor, kind to your friends, kind to the service workers that help you. Kindness is free. Thank you for being here. You can watch my movies anytime on Tubi, Tubi, Missing 411, Missing 411 The Hunted, Missing 411 The UFO Connection. And you can buy all my books at NA, like North America, nabigfootsearch.com. Go to the online store, $24.99 each. If you go on Amazon, anywhere between $100 and $150 each. That's not us selling them. That's resellers trying to rip you off. Do not buy any of my books on Amazon or online other than from us. Now, if you're outside the country, our international partners for all books is Hancock House Publishing in British Columbia. If you just Google Hancock House Publishing, Blaine, Blaine, you'll find them. And they sell all of our books, and they'll ship anywhere in the world. So keep them in mind. Again, thanks for being here. Paulides, out.